Welcome back. Now, markets around the world seem to be edging closer and closer to the brink of collapse, and investors seem to be selling wherever they hear the slightest bit of bad news. Now, this means that businesses are having to think very carefully about what they say and how they say it. We're going to find out how corporates should be talking the talk at a time like this. We're joined by communications expert Janine, who is a consultant who's done work for blue chip companies in 13 African countries, helping them refine their message, getting their brand and philosophy out there. She joins me now. Janine, the warmest welcome to Business AM. It's a time of market turmoil. It's a time of incredible angst. What sort of fundamental tools or rules should corporates be applying in speaking to shareholders, speaking to clients, even speaking to the staff?
Well, you've actually said it, Lerato. People need to talk. They need to speak. Everything is about communication. This isn't the time to duck and to dive and to evade questions. There's panic in the markets. There's been lots of negative news, so people really need to grab the bull by the proverbial horns and speak to people. People want to know what's going on.
Well, there's two elements to corporate communications. I mean, there's the branding, which we see through advertising, and the PR, you know, trying to create a positive image and philosophy. It's very hard to be a company with your stock value dropping, and then you say, we are still who we say we are, and we still have great potential. How do you do that?
Lerato, for me, in terms of communicating during a crisis, as we've said already, you've got to communicate. Evasion doesn't work. But I always talk to three particular issues. And one is that, first of all, you connect with a problem. You acknowledge that there's an issue going on, you are facing this crisis. You then go back to where you were and you speak to your positive track record and how well you've been doing. And you then go forward to say what measures you have in place to, well, you can't mitigate this crisis, but how you're going to ride the storm. So it's just a three-point plan. And if you connect, you throw back and you throw forward, that's a pretty good way of handling things.
Is there a frequency at which you should be engaging the media at a time like this?
All the time. All the time. You should have holding statements prepared. If you are not available, there should be somebody else who can talk on your behalf. People need to be reassured. They need to feel more comfortable. And the only way they can do that is if you're talking to them.
Okay, now that's largely to the markets, that's largely to your clients. What about the staff? Because we've seen a lot of banks and mortgage lenders go under in the United States. Not such a crisis right now in South Africa, but people are unsure of themselves. People are unsure as to whether they'll have a job next year or whether or not they'll have enough money to pay back the bond and still pay the school fees. How do you as a corporate speak to your staff and keep the morale up at a time like this?
It's exactly the same principle. You communicate. The last place a person wants to find out that they've lost their jobs is reading it on the front page of a newspaper or hearing a bulletin on radio. You need to be engaged all the time. There needs to be workshops, there needs to be strategy sessions, and the top levels do need to communicate to the lower levels, to the middle rung as well. Very often what happens with corporates, Lerato, is that a decision is made at top level and it's never cascaded down the ranks. And I mean, that's the issue. Everybody at this time, at all times, not just during a crisis, everybody has to be singing off the same hymn sheet.
Now, you've done extensive work for blue chip companies in about 13 African countries of various cultures and persuasions and sensitivities. Now, Africa, we're told, is relatively immune to what's happening because this is a credit crisis largely in the financial markets to which Africans are not exposed. So we can assume that the crisis isn't really at critical proportions in Africa. So there's still business to be done. For somebody whose expansion program is in Africa at a time like this, how do they speak, talk the talk of what they represent, giving a coherent strategy and identity in this different African space?
Well, I think first of all they need to understand who they're talking to. It is not the same market, it's a different market. There are different dynamics, there are different challenges, there are different opportunities. So first of all, before they even convey their message, they need to know who they're talking to. It's not a case excuse me, of one size fitting all. Right. That's the problem with most communicators and with most companies. You need to know who you're talking to. You then need to determine exactly what your messages are. What messages will speak to the people on the ground? And you then need to communicate as succinctly as possible.
I'm thinking here of a big telecommunications company, for instance, that does business in South Africa and then business in countries in West Africa and even in East Africa. And in South Africa, for instance, the campaign may be fresh and sexy and cosmopolitan because that's the sort of community or market you're operating in. But then you have to tweak it a little bit when you get out there because people are sensitive. They don't want to see an advertising campaign with a girl in hot pants and a midriff top. Talking sexily on a cell phone. But that's the success of the campaign here. Can you just export that campaign there because it's still the same product?
Absolutely not. We're talking about audience again. The first golden rule of communication is that your audience is king. If a cell phone advert with a woman in hot pants works in a South African market, it will not work in a Muslim-dominated country. We need to know this, so we need to adapt our message accordingly. We need to speak to the media accordingly. We need to speak to stakeholders accordingly.
Okay, now let's move this on to the public service, public sector platform. The response we often get from government communications when there's a crisis is no comment. And many people say no comment is not a good enough comment.
No comment is probably one of the, I think it's the 8th deadliest sin. We can go through the top 7, but we won't. It's the 8th deadliest sin in communication. No comment means you are being evasive, you are ducking, you are diving, your fingers on the till, you have something really terrible to hide. There are ways of saying no comment without saying no comment. We know the South African police. I mean, I was a crime reporter for years. What was the standard no comment that the South African police would give to journalists? That the net is closing in, or the felon won't escape the long arm of the law. So it's exactly that kind of scenario. If you really are uncomfortable about disseminating a message to media, there's a way to say you're uncomfortable. Thank the journalist for the opportunity for the interview, because it's a great opportunity. It'll brand you even during a time of crisis, and just run with it. Say, thank you for the question. What we are doing right now is X. We will update you as soon as we have information at our disposal. No comment is the worst thing you can do.
And what about just sifting through the jargon? There's market speak, which we have to deal with every day, which is even complex for a journalist like myself. And then there's political talk. We're speaking to the structures. That's what we're always hearing from the ANC. Or, you know, these are principles in line with our constitution, when basically you're saying to people, we can't provide a house, but we're hoping to in future. How can people just simplify the text?
At the end of the day, and that's why I'm running a government workshop for government communicators in November, people are not interested in jargon. Actually, people are not interested in everything you have to say, in everything you have to write. They'd rather be swimming, surfing, or sleeping, let's be honest. So what we need to do is we need to keep things simple. You need to say less, and in saying less, you actually say more. And the point is that you need to know when to shut the hell up.
And that's
the problem with government communicators. You're dealing with it's the basic English 101, Lerato. You know that as a journalist. It's the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Once you've got your key points across, stop. A journalist isn't a donkey. We don't need a carrot. If you haven't answered a question in the fullest possible extent that I am a journalist is comfortable with, well, then I'm going to ask you another question. I'm a trained interrogator.
I'm going to stop right here. Thank you very much, Janine Lazarus, for taking us through just the simple science, as it were, of corporate communications. Never say no comment. Talk to your clients, talk to your shareholders, talk to your people, especially at a time of crises. They want to know that you care as much as they do.